Interesting, today as we celebrate the Feast of St. Matthias, the first reading speaks about how the successor of Judas was selected. Kind of very appropriate since we've just gone through the conclave in which the 267th successor of St. Peter was selected, Pope Leo. And there are a lot of interesting similarities as to how the process of succession took place in the first century and how it takes place in the 21st century. There was the reality that there was an opening through Judas. And Peter convenes the whole body of 120 people and says, we've got to figure out who's going to carry on the work of the kingdom and follow in the footsteps of the apostles. And so they discern many candidates, and they come down to 2 candidates, and then from the 2 candidates they selected one. And it's not unlike how the conclave, it starts out with many candidates and there's a process of discernment. And discernment is a word we're not very familiar with. You know, when the death of Francis happened, immediately, the media approaches this like red states versus blue states, the northern hemisphere against the southern hemisphere, this faction, that faction, who's going to prevail in a very political contest. And while that's interesting analysis, that's just not what a discernment process is. The discernment is who is the best person, not where they came from, what their curriculum vitae looks like. It's how does this person continue the work? And when you go, the cardinals before the conclave spent days reflecting on the mission of the church. And it was the conclave that connects the mission with the person. You can have the greatest mission in the world, but who's going to carry that mission out? You're talking about a human being that has strengths and weaknesses like all of us. And Matthias comes forward to be part of carrying on the mission. And what is the mission? What is the mission? And the mission is described so beautifully in the gospel: love one another as I have loved you. That when it comes down to it, when we cut through all of the layers of interpretation and translations and perspectives, Jesus is asking us to love one another. And I think about the Women's Club. This year we have focused on the theme of service. And it's that sense of service that brings the word of love into reality. We can talk theoretically about we should love one another, but how does that happen? It happens when the hungry are fed, the homeless find shelter, when the discouraged are given hope, when the lonely are connected, when the sense of community is deepened. And it's through these acts of service that makes the mission very real. I think of Colleen and our officers and everyone this year. It's hard to wrap your head around all that happened. A year starts, and how are we going to get through this year? And then all of a sudden, it's drawing to a close. And it's important to take a moment to just think of what was accomplished. To think of hundreds and hundreds of people who we'll never know, benefited from the many efforts to care for people, whether it was casseroles or diapers or hygiene products or the innumerable efforts that the Women's Club took charge of this year. That's when the meaning and purpose of what we're doing becomes very real. It's when people's lives are changed by the love and care of others that is manifested in meeting some of the most basic needs. And then there's this network of guilds that always astounds me, to think of hundreds of women in the parish that are connected. For many of them, the guild is the connecting place for when they talk about OLPH, it's that relationship developed through the guilds that makes OLPH not a church, but a parish. And there's a big difference in that, of feeling connected. I'm always moved at funerals when I hear from the daughters say, my mom loved her guild, She loved her guild, and she was a part of the guild for 25 years or 30 years or 35 years. She raised us with all these other women raising children. We celebrated our joys, we dealt with our struggles, we celebrated our life. And we celebrate that carrying on of the mission. We look now in the year 2025 as to who we are as a church, and we have this historical legacy that goes back to those first apostles who embraced the mission, love one another. And when we look at how the Christian gospel flourished in the first and second centuries, it wasn't because of theological debates of one form or another. It was people seeing the poor being fed and housed, and the grieving people encouraged and loved and reached out to. It was in those very practical ways that the ancient world saw that the Christian gospel was very different than any other religious phenomenon that they knew. Today, we embrace this great challenge, a challenge that whether we're in the women's club or not in the women's club, we all are committed to love one another.
Thank you for joining us today. Our digital ministry provides a valuable service to parishioners and visitors alike. Daily and Sunday Mass, funerals, weddings, and fireside chats, among other things, can be seen locally, throughout the country, and even the world, in real time or at one's convenience. If you would like to support this effort, please go to olphglenview.org. Click on the gold Donate button and then the Sunday Giving icon to make a contribution on our secure online giving portal. We sincerely appreciate your past and ongoing support. Thank you for helping us continue this ministry. God bless.